Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Solutions Podcast. I'm Jim Pastor-Matis here with my co-host Michael Rosmer, and today we're honored to have a great friend of mine who doesn't just happen to be a great friend, but also an aspiring politician here in Bulgaria, Gabriel Valkov. Gabriel, welcome to the podcast, buddy.
Hello, everyone.
Great to have you with us.
Fantastic having you here. So, Gabriel, give us a little bit of a background about yourself, what you do, and obviously how that will help a little bit of our discussion today, which will be talking about Bulgaria, the challenges that Bulgaria faces, and how the upcoming generation of politicians, including yourself, may help fix some of those problems.
Mm-hmm. So I'm the International Secretary of the Bulgarian Socialist Party's Youth Union. And I participate in a lot of discussions in Bulgaria and outside of Bulgaria, especially in the European Union, because we are members of the Young European Socialists. So we are part of the big socialist family in Europe nowadays. I hope I can be useful in that discussion, and we can talk about all the problems that we have and how to fix them with you guys.
Sounds perfect. That's what we're here for, definitely.
So I was just going to start with probably some of the fundamental problems that we have noticed. So, for those of you that are new, Michael and I moved to Bulgaria some years ago. Michael has already left off to Dubai. Michael's Canadian, I'm Greek. So, we came, I still live here in Bulgaria. So we have the perspective of somebody that coming from abroad. I think it's going to be useful to also get the perspective of a native, let alone a politician. So I think it would probably be useful for us to start with talking about some of the fundamental problems that exist here. And I know that one of the things that we've been discussing is taxes. And though that's not a problem, that's something that we've discussed quite a lot, and how that can possibly be a catalyst to the good. Maybe like increasing taxes, which I think is one of your suggestions. Of course, correct me if I'm wrong, how that can help the country. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about that.
Mm-hmm. So taxes, you say?
Yes.
From one side, we are the political party as a social one that would like to increase the taxes. Mm-hmm. But I don't think that's something bad, because we don't want to increase the taxes for the working people and for the poor people and middle class. It's mainly increasing the taxes for the rich, because that's how it should be from one side, because you have the rich people that have the money, so you can take money from them because they have money. And the poor people, they don't have money, so they can't actually give you a lot of money. That's why you tax them less than you tax the richer ones in the country. And with that money, you can do all kinds of stuff. You can boost the education, you can boost the lifestyle of the country in many ways. You can give subsidies. For example, nowadays we have a huge problem with the electricity in Bulgaria, because it's really expensive. For the last 3 months, it rose with 3 times, 300% increase in the electricity. And now the government is trying to subsidize the electricity so they can lower the price. And it's a problem in Europe as well, but it's a big problem for Bulgaria, as it's the poorest country in the European Union. And we have people that are not able to pay their electricity, which is like a basic thing. If you can't pay your electricity, you're living in a really, really bad condition in that country. And we're here to help you. So because of that, the country needs money. And that's, for example, one way to get the money. Of course, there are a lot of other ways to do it, but taxes are like a main thing.
So maybe I want to dig into just understanding where you're coming from on this. So what would you say should inform the tax policy of a given country, in this particular case, Bulgaria? But what's kind of your mental model, your framework for thinking about, all right, why should taxes be X versus Y? I mean, so for context, anyone who's not familiar, we've mentioned it in some previous episodes, but actually Bulgaria has about some of the best taxes in the EU. It's 10% flat tax, 5% on dividends. So it's quite competitive within the EU and really within the world. Now, I can give you reasons for having it at 10%. I can give you reasons for having it at some other percent. obviously, Greece, it can be, over north of 50%. So what's your thoughts on, kind of the mental model, the framework for thinking about how much taxes should be at and for who?
Well, from one side, Bulgaria has the lowest taxes in the whole European Union. So if we increase them by a bit, I don't think it will be a huge problem or anything. I don't think that a lot of business orientated people will leave the country or something like that, because we've seen that in France, for example. People left the country because France added huge taxes, which were like 70%. Which was a huge tax. And some people left to other countries with lower taxes and they moved all their business there. We are not looking for that. We are looking for a small increase. Let's say for the dividend tax, it's 5%, as you say, we can make it 10. It's not the big of a rise, but you can, that way you tax the companies that have money, the big companies, for example, because it can be made like a progressive one. Like, for example, if you earn a certain amount of money, you pay more until you reach 10%. But as I'm not I'm not studying economics or anything, so I'm not that much of an expert how much taxes you need, the certain money that you earn. But for example, something that we did was like a few years ago, I think like 4 years ago, we had like a scheme or like a thing where we said, as I remember, it was 4 years ago, is that at if you earn 5,000 leva, you're going to pay 12.5% for the income tax I'm talking now. And if you earn, for example, more than 10,000, you're going to pay 15% and so on. It goes up to 20. But I'm not that much of a fan of that idea, because like that, you tax the normal people that are the working class. And here I'm mostly talking about taxing the companies. As I said, because they have, mainly they have the money. Of course, they're taking the risk, I know that. But the owner of the company is a lot richer, at least as the statistics show. Normally, the owner of a company is at least 10% richer, 10 times richer than the average worker in the company. So you can easily increase his taxes instead of his workers' taxes. And that's what I'm talking about mainly.
So kind of going into that a little bit, I mean, are you taxing based on trying to achieve particular outcomes? Because there's different philosophies, right? One is, all right, let's maximize the output. So there's something called the Laffer Curve. I think I've talked about it in some previous episodes, which basically shows how as you increase taxes, there's some optimal level which gives you the highest output. And then after a certain point, because of the drop off, people start doing things to try and avoid the tax, etc. And therefore you actually don't, even though you raise the taxes higher, you actually don't collect more revenue. So there's some consideration if you want to say that your objective is to maximize revenue. Now, what some other people would suggest, of course, is that the objective should not be for government to maximize revenue. That's not really the business of government. The government should more or less be probably collecting the minimum amount that is necessary, and then, kind of letting things be beyond that. Now, there's other reasons for increasing taxes, such as negative consequences of social inequality that come about from basically differences in wealth. And there's obviously some negative consequences. We've talked about that previously. Do you have thoughts on like what the objective is in determining what your tax policy should be?
Mm-hmm. Well, nowadays, Bulgaria has a really bad economy, which is because we just don't produce anything nowadays. We don't have enough factories, and they're the main source of money in a country. Most of the business is orientated in utilities. We have a lot of call centers, let's say, and stuff like that, which is not bad. The thing is, this doesn't give you profit, like a profit for the country, because you have people working there, but these are normally companies that are based outside of Bulgaria, so they don't pay a lot of taxes here, actually. They just give some amount of money to some people that work there. It's the same for the IT companies as well. And that's mainly how all the economy of Bulgaria works, in offices and not in actually factories or mines or stuff that produce a lot of money at the end. Because, for example, you can mine a resource and after that you can produce, let's say, a computer out of it. If it's metal, let's say, I don't know. But you can make it like you have the whole line of economy, like the circle, to close the circle in the country. What we do here is whatever we produce, we bring it, we export it outside of Bulgaria, and somebody else is making the huge profit, because normally the raw material, it doesn't give you the profit that the already made thing gives you as a profit. For example, if you mine metal, it costs some sort of money, but if you make out of that metal, let's say a phone or something, of course it has a lot of other things inside, but the profit you get from the phone at the end of the day is much higher than the raw materials of the phone. Right. Which is a problem because Bulgaria doesn't earn enough as a country and as economics. That's why we're looking for raising the taxes a bit. And you need that money for the country to function. Because
so let me stop you there for a second. Mm-hmm. So do you think that increasing taxes is going to drive more manufacturing in Bulgaria? And like, what do you think will cause there to be, if the narrative is that, okay, we want to do more value add industry in the country, what will attract and create more of that within Bulgaria?
For sure, it won't bring any more factories or anything like production. But the thing is that you need that money in order for the country to function. And after that, you can use the money that you taxed and invest them back into factories. You can invest them in different things through the government. You can make different grants, I think they're called, and you can make like projects, and if you have a nice project, the country can fund your project, and you can open a factory in Bulgaria, let's say, or you can open something to manufacture something. So you can invest those money that you tax more and invest them back into Bulgaria, because we were thinking about making a fund, which was, I think, 500 million euro. And out of those 500 million euro, their money that have to be spent only in investments through the Ministry of Economics, let's say. So if you have a nice project for making something in that country, the government can fund you and you start producing after that. And maybe it can be a credit, so you can turn it back to the country. There can be like many ways, so they can be just money granted to you without you having to return them back to the country. Something like the European projects, because that's what the European projects do. They give money to Bulgaria, they invest money in Bulgaria in different spheres of the economy of the country. And after that, they're spent and they're used in Bulgaria, and we don't have to return them back. Sometimes they fund, for example, 80%, sometimes it's 50% of the business, and the others are co-funded by the Bulgarian government or by the person investing. It depends on the European project. So we want to make something like that, but inside Bulgaria.
Mm-hmm. Something I wanted to ask, which I think I'm just going to emphasize a little bit on what Michael is asking. So though I get the points and some of the logic behind them, I think that Bulgaria is in quite a delicate position from the perspective of that you have a unique position in EU and generally in the world on having the taxes that you do, and you have done a good job attracting businesses to come here, right? So for example, Greece has done a terrible job at that, right? They don't have tax policies that invite businesses but make them flee. Now, of course, I understand that saying, hey, listen, going from 10, 15% and adding 5% shouldn't be a big deal. Given that you have a very advantageous position here with taxes, if you mess with them, is it a risk that you're okay taking, given that a lot of people may say, okay, well, I'll now go to the next best thing, and that may no longer be Bulgaria. So is that something that, I don't know, is a discussion in the government? I mean, if you know, of course, or is that something that is like, okay, look, we'll take the risk and we'll see how it works out and adjust after the fact?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm sure there is a discussion about it. I haven't followed it, of course. If there was one, I don't know if it was public at all. The thing is that we had this year, like the past year already, 2021, we had 3 elections in the country, 3 times elections in a row, because we couldn't form a government at the end, which was the first time this has ever happened in our country. So after the 3rd parliamentary elections in Bulgaria, we finally made a government. And our party, the Bulgarian Socialist Party, is in that government. We have 4 ministries that we took in that government, and one of them is the economics, as I said. That's mainly working with that investments in the country to the business. We have the social one with all the social benefits, pensions, and stuff like that. We have the tourist one for bringing more tourists to Bulgaria, which is one of our main policies as well. And the 3rd one is the agricultural one, which is another problem for Bulgaria, because we have a really good soil here in Bulgaria. And we had a big agriculture long ago, but nowadays it's underused, if I can say that, and not many people are investing in that thing to produce vegetables and like the basic needs of the country. So through that ministries and through that coalition we are in, because we have 4 parties in the coalition, and that's one of the biggest coalitions we have ever had in Bulgaria, of so many parties. So it's kind of hard to work in such circumstances because you have 4 different opinions on everything. But from the other side, you have maybe the best decisions at the end because of the 4 opinions. So everybody gives his own opinion, then we have to make some kind of consensus at the end. So that's a really good way to manage things. So that's why we talked about taxes. And this was one of our suggestions, as we're the only left party in that coalition. The others are right or centrist parties. So we're the only left party in the coalition. We proposed raising the taxes. And after a lot of talks, they decided that for at least for the first year, we're not going to touch the taxes at all. Everything stays as it is. And we'll try to fix the problems. And one of the ways to fixing it and getting more money into the country is by collecting the taxes in a better way. Because until now, we had a lot of taxes which were not collected in the gray economy. Which never actually went to the government, so they could never be spent and redirected wherever they're needed. That's why they're going to try to collect the taxes as good as possible and collect them from the big companies, not from the small ones, because what the previous government did was they were taxing and like having all these people to check if everybody's paying their taxes. And they were like making a lot of trouble to the small business because it was easier for them to do it that way and to tax the small business because they don't have the so-called connections in the government. While the rich ones, the big businesses, they normally have connections in the government. And because our governments are mostly corrupt, at least the previous ones, that's why through that connections, they were tax evading all the time. And now what we're trying to change exactly that, to stop the tax evasion from the big companies and start taxing them more later on if it's needed. Because if we manage to do it that way, we're not going to raise the taxes at all, if we manage to collect more taxes than we used to.
So maybe a few things to dive into here, because there's a bunch of pieces you mentioned. So starting with, you mentioned the idea of having a fund. The fund is an interesting idea if it can be deployed well. I'm somewhat skeptical of the ability of government to effectively deploy capital in that regard. And I feel like this has been an ongoing problem for Bulgaria in general. To your point about corruption, okay, great, lots of money's come from the EU, but how much of it has actually gone into actually making things better for the government versus, somebody gets a contract where things are bloated and they end up spending less money on quality than they should, and filling their pockets with,
for example, roads,
else.
right?
Roads being one of the big examples.
Yeah.
So I feel as though it's hard to rationalize saying, hey, listen, it's good for the government to collect more money from people when the government's doing a poor job with the money that they've got. And it's hard to argue, hey, listen, let's put into place a fund when the problem kind of at the root of that is, okay, well, how do those funds get distributed? if they're going to be redirected to some friends of the government who are then going to, put them in their own pockets directly or indirectly, then what's the point? You didn't really gain anything.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's the other side of the things, that we have to stop the corruption, and that's one of the main things that our country has to do, and it's the most important one, because of the corruption, everything else fails. Because of the corruption, you have bad roads, you have bad hospitals, you have bad education, everything is worse than it should be, and it can be better. The thing is, what some statistics say, it's like around 10 billions are stolen from the people's money every single year.
Yeah.
And
Whoa.
that's 10 billion per year.
Wow.
And that's a lot of money. You can invest them, you can do whatever you like with them, but the thing is, the government
almost $2,000 per person, to
yeah,
put it into context.
yes,
In a country where the average GDP per capita is like maybe $8,000, so like 25% of a person's per capita GDP income is
Is
being
stolen.
stolen and could be redirected. So, basically just, don't give them taxes, don't take taxes, just 25% more, and you're good.
yeah, that's one of the things that we are trying now, to stop the corruption, and through stopping the corruption and through collecting taxes, to have a bigger budget for the country and fix our problems that way. Because if we stop all these corruptions, as I said, 10 billion more are going to be in the country. If we stop half of them, it will be great. If not all, of course, we are trying to do our best to stop everything. But the thing is that you have the roads, as I think Jim said, there is the most corruption is there. You also have all the big projects, like, for example, they were, I don't know what they're called actually, because this new government, they found a lot of stealing in this huge water reservoirs. I don't know what they called in English actually, the like lakes with the dam.
Yeah.
So they were building new dams. I mean, they were not building new dams, they were fixing the old dams of those places. And when fixing the dams, they spent like 600 million for fixing dams, and at the end they didn't fix anything. Like, they were the same. So they just stole 600 million euro or lever, I don't remember, but it was like a huge thing. And this is one of the things that we caught, as our new government caught that problem. And now it's going to the prosecutors and everything to find where did all those money went. And there was another huge scandal that was a few months, not even a few months, few days ago, weeks or something, where from one of our banks in Bulgaria, some businessmen that were working with roads again and building roads, they took from the bank in cash 50 million leva or euro, I don't remember, but like a huge thing, and they sent it to Dubai. So because many of the business men in Bulgaria went to Dubai because they can't be extradited, I think. I don't know if that's the correct word. But they can be extradited from Dubai to Bulgaria because there isn't such a law. So nothing actually happens to them, and they just hide in Dubai and just spend their money there. So that's another thing which we actually can't fix for now, because we just can't do anything about them staying in Dubai. And we are just sending them letters from the prosecution in Bulgaria saying, you should come back to Bulgaria in order to go to jail. And he's like, okay, thank you. And that's how it goes, and you can't do anything. Which is another problem. But the thing is, yeah, by stopping corruption, you can stop spending money for useless things, and the money going into somebody's pocket, and invest them into something useful.
So what would you say are the root causes? I guess I have three questions around corruption. One is, what would you say are the root causes? Number two, do you have templates of other countries that have successfully fought corruption that you use to look at what to do about it? And number three, kind of, what do you think are the best ways to address the corruption and reduce it?
Well, the roots. Well, everything with the corruption, at least what I think, is everything started around 30 years ago, after the Soviet Union dissolved and Bulgaria became a democratic country. Because by changing regime, you change everything in the country, and this destabilizes the whole country. Our GDP went down by half for a couple of years after that. So it was a huge crisis in the country. The governments were falling every single year. So every year you have a new government which starts doing something. It can't do anything for 1 year, of course, because you need at least 4 to do something useful for the country. Then people start protesting because there is no money in the country, no foods in the stores. For example, 1996 was one of the worst years. 1996 winter was a really bad time for the normal people because there wasn't anything in the supermarkets. I don't know why exactly it happened that way. For sure, it was from like there was how to say it. There was a foreign. What is it like? I don't know a word for that in English, but like there were other countries messing with Bulgaria.
Interference, you wanted to say.
Interference, exactly.
Okay, cool.
There was interference from like a foreign interference in Bulgaria at that time, and there were huge problems then. There were huge protests in Bulgaria. The government fell after that because there was actually nothing in the stores. And around that time, one leva was $3,000. I mean, $1 was 3,000 leva.
Oh, I'm sitting here.
Yeah.
Okay.
And this
very high inflation. Yeah.
This happened for like a year. So then everything went so expensive. The inflation was one of the highest in the world. And then people had no money because of that. You had savings in the bank, which went from, with that savings, you can buy an apartment, let's say. 1 year later, you have $10.
Yeah.
It was like huge problem. And because of that, and because of all these things going on in the country, there was a lot of corruption. As the governments were changing, the people didn't care about corruption because they were only caring what are they going to eat the next day, which is a huge problem because you can't think about who is stealing money, what is going on, when you're actually thinking if you're going to have food on the table for your kids tomorrow. And that was one of the reasons. After that, things started to change a little bit after the 2000. But then what happened around the 2000s was all the economy of Bulgaria was state-owned. The factories and everything, they were all sold. There was a lot of corruption in selling all those things. For example, the Bulgarian aviation with all the airports and with 100 airplanes was sold for $100,000. So you buy 100 airplanes and airports for $100,000, and that's it. The government says, well, we can't keep that working because we are going to bankrupt, so we have to sell it because it's using too much money. We have to subsidize it, and we don't have the money, so we just sell it. And that happened to a lot of things. This was one of the big ones. There was another big thing, Kremikovci, which is next to Sofia. It's actually a whole neighborhood next to Sofia. There were 40,000 people working there. It was a huge production complex working with metal. And it was sold for $1 because it was going to bankrupt. So they decided to sell a huge factory with like roads, buildings, everything for 40,000 people working there, and they sold it for $1. And people didn't do much about it because they had bigger problems. As I said, they were caring about if they're going to have food on the table, and the government just said, well, we can't keep it on working. It's wasting too much money for the government, so we just sell it. And all these 40,000 people are left on the street because they are jobless the next day. So there were huge problems back then, and that's why the corruption came in Bulgaria. The thing is, we can't fix it 30 years later, and that's mainly nowadays. It's mainly because of the prosecution and the judicial system. Mainly the prosecution actually nowadays, because we have a new chief prosecutor. His name is Ivan Geshev. And the problem is that he was kind of appointed by the mafia, is what we think here, like the general public thinks. And I can agree with the general public about that, because he's not chasing any of the rich people, and he's just working as a guy who protects the old government. And whatever the problem with that is, whenever you find, like, for example, Michael was stealing money, let's say, and I give it to the main prosecutor, and he's like, he was a minister. Through his ministry, they were stolen. For example, there was 1 billion stolen, and the main prosecutor is like, I can't prove that, so I'm just not gonna do anything. And he doesn't even go to the court, because in order for it to go to the court, there has to be a prosecution, and then it goes to the court. But the thing is, he stops everything in the beginning. And he says, well, I don't have enough evidence in order to make a case for that. So there is no case, and everything just stays like that. And that's a huge problem.
So what do you see being able to do about that? Like, what do you see as the solutions?
The main problem is that, for example, for the main prosecutor, the solution is very, very hard, because his mandate is 7 years. So for the next, because he was elected last year or the year before, actually, so he has at least 5 more years mandate until we choose a new main prosecutor of the country. So
and how is he selected? What's the selection process?
It's a really, really hard process, which is every party in the parliament has a few people. I think 3 people that go to. It's called. I don't know, what is it called, like the highest rank of judiciary thing. So there are like 20 something people there that elect the next prosecutor. Every party appoints 3 people in that committee, let's call it a committee. And then we have there is one judge there, not one, there are a few judges actually, for the main, like the chief of the administrative court, and so on and so on. Like, I'm not that much into that, so I'm not sure for everybody who's there, but there are like 25 people that appoint the next prosecutor. The thing is that most of them can be influenced by the government. That's why he is protecting the government in most cases. The other problem is that I don't know how this could be actually fixed, because this is the best way to choose a new chief prosecutor, because you have the diversity from all the parties. So, for example, if you're a governing party, you shouldn't be able to deal with me if I'm in the opposition, but things in Bulgaria are different. So at the end, they kind of deal and choose a chief prosecutor, which is like their person, let's say, and who is going to protect them no matter who is governing the country. And I don't know how is this going to be fixed. For now, we have to change it. The problem is that in order to change it, you need to change the constitution of the country and change his mandate and all this, because actually the only way to change it is if he resigns. And the thing is, he's never going to resign. Like, why would you resign if you're a main chief prosecutor of Bulgaria? And if you're hiding the mafia and they're funding you and giving you a lot of money? So there is no reason for you to resign at the end. And the new government is trying to fix that problem. I'm sure we're going to fix it somehow. The thing is, we need the votes from the opposition now. Because in order to change the constitution, you need 2/3 of the parliament, and we don't have 2/3. As governing parties. So we need some parties from the opposition to help us change that. The thing is, they will never do it because they were the governing parties that actually appointed him. So we're like in a blocked way, and there is no way out.
Yeah.
So like, what is the accountability on him? Like,
that's exactly what I was going to go over, right? Accountability. That's the main problem. And I think that for people to be accountable, there has to be transparency. And I don't think that the average person understands how everything works, from, how you get elected to all those things, and what the expectations are from each elected official. So I think that if the government increased transparency and probably educated the public a little bit about how this whole thing works and how much the opposition's votes count in reform like this, I think that there would be a much higher chance for there to be some accountability behind people's actions, instead of just saying, "Hey, listen, we elected him. We're not going to do it just because." Sorry, Michael, for interrupting you. Were you going to add something else?
Well, I mean, the first question I was going to say is, if you're saying, "Hey, listen, he's taking money from the mafia, etc., conceivably an investigation could be opened against him. He could be charged, prosecuted." They're like, who is it who prosecutes him? if
The thing
he
is,
is a
nobody
criminal.
can prosecute him. He's the top chief level. Like nobody's
So
above him.
so in the design of the system in Bulgaria, nobody can prosecute him.
Yeah.
Really? So
Wow.
what if he commits a crime, there's nobody that can prosecute him. Like, it doesn't have to be something money related. If he goes and kills somebody in cold blood just because he's the prosecutor, he can't be prosecuted?
Well, I guess maybe then he can be prosecuted. The thing is, it's like I mean, all of the prosecutors are kind of like in the same community, so they're like protecting their backs. So nobody wants to try to even prosecute him because they're like friends.
Okay, so there's
Talk
two
to each
separate
other.
problems. The one problem is, okay, hey, listen, he can actually be prosecuted, but you would need another prosecutor who was willing to go after him, and the other prosecutors aren't willing to because there's a buddy little boys club there where they take care of each other.
Yeah, and
Okay.
even the European Union is trying to help at some point. The thing is, they can't actually do much because they can't just come into our country and change everything. But they're like giving us some texts from their laws, and they're like trying to do their best to help us remove him as a prosecutor from one side, and to change like the whole judiciary and prosecution system in Bulgaria, because there should be some kind of changes. He can't be like the leader of the country or something, the supreme leader that nobody can change and nobody can touch,
Right.
because that's kind of how it is now. And the funny thing is that he knows how strong he is in the country. And even in some interview after he was elected, he said, "Above me, there is only God." He even said that like in front of everybody, and he didn't care.
How do I get this position? Sounds great.
Yeah, I think it's a much more reasonable proposition to go after corruption than to go after increasing taxes for the average company. Because per what you're saying, if you were able to solve corruption, which is obviously an extremely complicated problem, you wouldn't just be able to do it. But if you were able to be more efficient on how corruption is handled in Bulgaria, you would automatically have the same net benefit capital-wise that you probably would with taxes. So and that's the thing. Given the history of the government of Bulgaria, it's very difficult for people to go and believe that taxes raised will be good taxes used, right? Whereas, for example, Trump used it in his political campaign, which was drain the swamp, right? Like, and get rid of corruption in the US. And that's something that people actually back. And so if you guys were able...
That's what you need to do, Gabriel. You need to like just take some like excerpts from Trump speeches, drain the swamp and, go and rally the people so that,
No, but I think that if
Make
you're
Bulgaria great again.
Exactly.
You see, listen,
You can just template it. It's no problem at all.
Just put it on the wall.
Absolutely.
Oh,
Get yourself some hats, and
no, I think that'd be great. I mean, look, I'm in a marketing business. If you need help, just give me a ring.
I'll think about it.
But no, the bottom line is this: if right now people view the government as corrupt, I think that, and that's my opinion, of course, that the objective should first be how do we increase trust so we can have people's backing, right? Because every action the government takes is viewed as, hey, look, they're just trying to stop the businesses, stop the consumers, whatever, and take more money. Whereas if you're just showing that, hey, listen, we're trying to solve corruption and be more efficient with capital to, make Bulgaria better, and then after you have some basic infrastructure that shows that, capital is used better, and here's how we do it, and so on, then you can probably start making an argument about, okay, now we're also going to take some additional capital from taxes and we're going to do X, Y, and Z, and use that capital for X, Y, and Z. Instead of making it an initial political goal, which I don't think is going to be viewed well, is definitely by business people, but of course by people as well. And look, people may have the idea that tax the rich because that's the right thing. They have a lot of money, so tax them. But there is an effect that is passed down to the average person by taxing the richer more. and that's, they end up making different decisions in their business, from where they hire to what, products, and from where they import them, and so on and so on. So I think it's way more of a multivariate problem than just, increasing taxes on the rich will automatically bring this revenue that then we'll be able to use.
Yeah, I think like when I think about it, there's a few different things that come to mind. So one, to Jim's point about accountability, transparency is a big deal. So I would ask, and by the way, this also happens to factor into collection of taxes, right? There's probably a lot of people who are
True.
not actually paying their tax. Well, if you've got more transparency, more openness, there's probably some major advantages of that. So I'd be curious to see what are the ideas around increasing transparency and openness. Obviously, right now, the Bulgarian system is not very computerized. You can go down to the immigration department and see pretty much everything's still done on paper.
Yeah.
And it's just a lot easier to change a paper than it is to have a public database that everybody sees, especially if it's immutable or something like that. And the adjustments can be made accordingly. So that would be one thing that I'd be curious about, is what can be done in that regard. The second thing is the tax revenue equation is essentially a combination of three factors that people seem to not pay attention to this. There's a lot of focus on tax rates, but really the total amount of revenue is equal to number of people multiplied by the average income per person, or the average whatever is being taxed per person, multiplied by the rate. And so there's three variables you can use there in order to increase the revenue. The one is we can increase it by increasing the rate. Now, again, we have Laffer Curve constraints in there. So conceivably, certain people will either not come or will leave, etc., if you increase the rates. I don't really think that it's a high degree of likelihood that certain groups or individuals, certainly locally, will leave based on increasing taxes. I do think that there's a lot less foreigners from other parts of the EU who will come if you do. And the simple reason for that is just right now there's not a lot of competition. So if you were to just compare, okay, you could go to neighboring Romania, you've got 16% tax. You could go up to Lithuania, you've got 15% tax. You could go to Hungary, typically 15% tax, 9% on corporations, etc. Well, the moment you say, hey, listen, let's raise our tax rate from 10 to 15, now why would I choose to go to Bulgaria? The truth, unfortunately, is that by many metrics, Bulgaria is a less attractive place to go. If I'm going to choose all things being equal, I'm going to choose to go to Hungary over going to Bulgaria, just because Budapest offers more. It's just plain considered to be a nicer place, etc. And so I can start running down that list. So I think that right now, a lot of people will come from France. They'll come from, you could probably honestly have a campaign to get people to move from France, Spain, and Italy and places like this to come to Bulgaria and live. And you could probably increase your tax revenue simply by attracting more entrepreneurs who, or not, it doesn't even have to be entrepreneurs. It can just be in the days of remote work, people who are, earning a decent income working online and saying, hey, you guys should come to Bulgaria where the taxes are low and the socials are reasonable. The socials aren't low in Bulgaria, but reasonable. And up it goes. So bottom line of why I'm saying this is, okay, Bulgaria has a problem with population declining. And unfortunately, it's not just a population decline problem. It's typically the best and brightest, most productive people are leaving Bulgaria because they can do better jobs in Germany, in UK, in Ireland, et cetera, et cetera. So it's like, that's one thing. Like, okay, how do you keep those people? How do you attract new people? Number two, how do you boost the overall average income of your people in your country? Because if people are making more money, then they're paying more taxes. Great, that's good. And so I would tend to be focusing more on those elements than on the tax side, because to Jim's point, I think it's more tenuous. You kind of shake a little bit of what is there. So I'd be asking, like, okay, what are some examples of countries that have been built up really successfully, who have been behind and they've accelerated growth? What have they done to get, say, more factory development, et cetera? Is it primarily grants? I don't actually think that the majority of cases that's been the issue. I'd be curious to know if somebody was to examine. I can tell you as a business owner and as somebody who deals with business owners around the world, including in Bulgaria, you could look at something like IT. IT is typically a high margin business. There's a lot of possibility there. well, you have a limited labor supply in Bulgaria, unfortunately. So if you try to, it's fine if you're running a really small company, but if you start running 30, 50 developers or something, you're constantly recruiting and there's kind of a scarcity of people. So, okay, well, maybe what needs to happen is we need to cultivate more talent. Maybe we need to be in a situation where we attract developers from other parts of the EU. I mean, it's so easy for people to come from anywhere in the EU to Bulgaria and have them come in. Maybe you need to be in a situation where you need to find other positions like that you can get going. Like, what would it take to have a factory? I mean, Bulgaria could be a really good entry point to the EU for a lot of people. If I'm a factory owner in Asia, what is it that I'm thinking about in terms of being able to access the common market? Why do I choose to go to Bulgaria compared to choosing to go to Hungary or somewhere else? And I don't think that necessarily has to be giving grants or something. I think it's like, you need to probably have conversations with those people and figure out, okay, why are you going there? Maybe there's resource supply considerations. Maybe, I mean, the airport, the infrastructure is not amazing in Bulgaria. The fact that it's not in the Schengen zone probably hurts. The fact that it's the lev rather than the euro means I have conversion rates. That's probably a little bit annoying. I don't know what the consequences would be in some of those regards, but I'd be curious to dive into some of the specifics to say, what do we do to attract a lot more of these businesses to set up locally? Because look, clearly from a tax policy standpoint, it's the most attractive place. So why is anyone going to I think the biggest question is, why are businesses going to any place other than Bulgaria in the EU when clearly Bulgaria has the most attractive tax policy?
Yeah. A lot of questions.
Well, no,
so
but
I don't know where to start from. The thing is, first of all,
I guess to help you with this is, what can Bulgaria do in order to start attracting more businesses instead of making them leave with up and coming and considered tax policies and so on, and as well as people, right? Like, you want to attract more talent. People that don't necessarily have to start businesses, that are going to come here and work as freelancers or whatever, or employees, or business owners that want to come here and say, okay, why should I go to Bulgaria instead of going to, say, Hungary or somewhere else?
Okay, so first of all, one of the things you can do is a really big marketing campaign. Because many people don't even know where Bulgaria is on the map.
Sure, yeah.
From one side, from the other side, even if they've ever heard of Bulgaria, they don't know anything about it, which means you need a really big marketing campaign all over the world, maybe, and in the European Union especially, where you can say to everybody, hey, here is Bulgaria, we have really good taxes here, we have a good environment, let's say, and one of the most important things, especially for the manufacturing, is that in Bulgaria, you have a really low minimum wage, and you have to pay less to the workers than you have to pay all around Europe. In the same time, you get the European market, because when you're in any of the European zone countries, European Union's countries, you have the market of all those countries, because free trade of goods and money and people around the European Union. So what you actually get is that you can manufacture something in Bulgaria and then sell it in Germany, let's say, and you produce it at a much lower cost. So nowadays we are kind of like we can be China of Europe, let's say, where you have the low taxes from one side, and where you have all the people working for not a lot of money compared to Europe, which is bad for us as a country, but from the other side, it can be attractive for the business owners. Later on, this will develop and rise the whole standard of the country, and we will become a more expensive country through the years. And because the wages are going to rise every single year and so on and so on. So people will spend more money and want more money. So yes, this will increase the living standard in Bulgaria. And now it's attractive for the company owners to invest in Bulgaria. As we have, for example, nowadays the minimum wage in the country is 350 euro. So compared to Germany, where it's 2,000, it's like uncomparable. So opening a factory in Germany, you have to pay way more money to the workers from one side. You have to pay more money for everything else because everything is cheaper in Bulgaria. For materials from one side, from other side, the electricity, the water, everything. Now currently no, because we have a 3 times increase, but normally it's cheaper.
Yeah.
And the water is cheaper, and the rent is cheaper, and everything that you need is
cost of living. Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be cheaper if you do it in Bulgaria, and the taxes are way less. So you have the perfect environment. The thing is, nobody's coming to invest in Bulgaria after all that. And why is that happening? As I said, from one side, they don't know about all those benefits. But from the other side, I think corruption is a huge problem because they don't feel safe in Bulgaria. Like when you're in Germany, you know that everything is safe. You don't have mafia there. You don't have anybody to make problems to you. You don't have a bad government that if it sees that you earn a lot of money, they can start like, I don't know how to say it, but they can come to you and be really nice with you and be like, if you want to keep having your nice business in our country, you have to give us that amount of money.
Does that really happen? I'm very shocked to hear that now in 2022. Is that something that still happens today?
It still happens.
It still happens. Yeah.
But like to the very big companies, and I've heard that from a lot of places. Like even
that doesn't even have to be that big a company. From like I know people with companies that aren't that big who have had something along those lines happen.
Yes, and it happens all around Bulgaria now. I mean, that's what the old government did. The thing is that now we have a new government, and I really have a lot of hope in that new government, not only because we're inside it, but because of our prime minister now, because he has a huge business in Canada. So he has I think, I'm not sure if American and Canadian or only Canadian citizenship, but he had a Canadian citizenship for sure. He was studying in Harvard University, and he's like a really clever young man of around 40 years old. So I have a lot of hope in him because he's been abroad. He's seen how things are done abroad and how the business and everything runs outside of Bulgaria. So he will try to implement that in our country. And I really hope that this is going to happen. And after that, we can move to like the next level and become a normal country.
Yeah.
Also, another thing I just want to mention is that in Malta, what they did it in December, I think, which was 1 month ago. They made a really nice campaign that I saw on the internet about moving to Malta. And that's something we can do in Bulgaria as well, but it has to be discussed, of course, with this government. And I am thinking to propose it to our parliament members and everybody, because that can be a really nice law. What they made there is that you can get citizenship for the country for 1 year, like a 1 year citizenship, kind of like a working visa, or I don't know what is it called.
Residency.
Yeah, like a residence, but like a 1 month, 1 year residence.
Yeah.
Residency. And they made that in order to have like business people, and not only business people, but working class people as well, that are like in the higher levels of the society, to move to Malta and make it like a home office place. Because, for example, they earn, like, for example, they're ITs and they earn like 5,000 euro, and they can come to Bulgaria in that case, and they can live a cheap life here where their rent is going to be really low. They're going to spend money, and they're going to spend less money than they're going to spend in any other European country. That's what Malta did. And they get a citizenship. They have the free market of Europe. And when they get a Bulgarian citizenship, they can travel to the whole European Union without any problems. And this is nice if you're coming from abroad, if you're coming from a country, not the US, for example, but if you're coming from an African country, let's say, because they have IT people there a lot. As well. And for example, if you're from Nigeria, you're coming to Bulgaria, you get a Bulgarian citizenship, you're working here. Of course, you have to bring a lot of documents in order to do that, but you do it online. You just say what you're working, that you're home office, that you can do it from another country. It's not a problem for your company. And what Malta said in their advertisement is that there are 5 million people around the world that are working from abroad and they can work from everywhere.
Yeah.
So they're focusing in that 5 million people so they can come to Malta and spend their money there. And that's a good way. That's something like what Michael said, that people can come to Bulgaria and rise the standard of living of our country that way.
Right.
Yeah, just a few points of clarification there. So they don't get citizenship. It's extremely difficult.
They get residency. Right.
Yeah, but it's the funny thing is that it's a 1-year residency, but you can reapply. So you can basically stay here forever if you're working that job.
Well, I think we should clarify a little bit what the difference is too, for those who are watching and don't know the difference, so there's no confusion. Residency is the ability to go to the country and actually live there, and based on what visa you get, you can maybe work or not, right? Like different visas have different privileges that you can have in a country. Citizenship is you are a passport holder, you have the ability to work. You have the access to public healthcare and so on and so on. You're an actual citizen of the country, right? Like, so Michael, sorry, I know you have a thought, so I don't want to interrupt that one.
Yeah, so it's a good clarification, and just so that people are clear. One advantage Malta has, and by the way, I think it's a great idea. I think that absolutely Bulgaria should have a digital nomad visa. Like, in my opinion, it is not that easy. As somebody who's immigrated to Bulgaria, it's not that easy to go and immigrate to Bulgaria if you're not from within the EU.
Yeah.
And if I compare to Dubai, I'm in Dubai today, it's much easier in Dubai. Dubai basically has a policy where they say, hey, if you're coming here to contribute and follow our laws, you're welcome. No problems. If you're not going to contribute, goodbye. If you don't follow our laws, well, we'll cut off your hands. But a little less extreme than that. But the point is, I think that's a great policy because, in part, people who are coming in that capacity put relatively little strain on the system and add value. And the interesting thing with those people is they don't need to pay. I think that you could tax them. Like in the case of Malta, they explicitly state that they don't tax people income tax because they're expected to be taxed in their home country. I think you can get away with taxing them in Bulgaria because the taxes are quite low. Malta, comparatively, for reference, has a 35% top tax rate, so it's pretty different. But I think Bulgaria could say, like a lot of people would love to come to Bulgaria and say, hey, I can pay 5 or 10% depending on my source of income, and this is great. I'll contribute it. But on top of that, VAT rates are relatively high, and these people are going to spend money domestically. So provided you can capture the VAT off them, that's another source of income. And it's a source of income for people who you don't have to pay for services the same way you do for local citizens. So, whereas local citizens, you need to provide health care, you need to provide all these things. The cost of roads are the same, whether you have another 10,000 people using them or not. It costs you the same. So then these people are going to go and spend money in your shops, which means that they're going to give jobs to locals. So I think it's a really great policy. To the point. Go ahead.
Yeah. So sorry, if you want to go all the way, I go all the way. I would discuss something that we talked about last time specifically on this, which is that one of the fundamental problems also with the country, and again, that gets some people's feelings hurt here, but it's that, construction and, the buildings don't look very appealing. They're still communist buildings and so on in a big part of the country. And so, Michael and I were trying to assess where the root causes of that problem is, right? Like, okay, are the buildings just there just because nobody does anything? And so I know people that have construction companies, and the common thing I keep hearing is that there's a total lack of staff, of qualified staff. So one of the things that we discussed and I came to the conclusion of is that specialized staff is something that Bulgaria lacks in the construction space. And this is just one example, one industry of the many. And in order to attract these folks, from like Asia and so on, to come here, you have to create incentives. And okay, so not being in the Schengen zone, I think, is one thing that is a bit of a problem. So joining the Schengen zone, so people can actually, go anywhere in the Schengen zone while having a residency here, I think would be very beneficial. That's number one. But number two is improving immigration, so dual citizenship is allowed for those who come here and naturalize over time, right? So any EU country, and Michael, correct me if I'm wrong. Most EU countries, anyway, will give you citizenship for naturalizing, right? For going there, staying for X amount of years, you get citizenship, and citizenship is forever, right? Residency, you can lose it. You know, visas expire and so on. Permanent residency is okay, like that's another thing. But citizenship is something that folks are. It's something very, very important to them, right? Like it's a connection to the country as well, right? It's they become an intrinsic part of the country. So having dual citizenship restricted like it is today, to where if you want to become dual citizenship of Bulgaria through naturalization, you have to most likely give up your other citizenship, I think is a big disincentive to not come here. And if you want to attract these folks, then immigration reform is something that definitely needs to be considered. So you can be more competitive like some of these other countries that invite these folks to, you know, come and work, but also get citizenship over time if they are, you know, good law-abiding citizens.
Yeah, I think the poster child for this right now really is Portugal. Within the EU, Portugal's been super effective at attracting people over the last while. They created some immigration policies that are pretty attractive. They combined them with a 10-year tax incentive. Bulgaria doesn't need to do the 10-year tax incentive. Bulgaria's already got a competitive tax system, so no need to do that. But the thing that you can get is you can get citizenship after 5 years in Portugal. In Bulgaria, it's 5 years to qualify for permanent residency, and then you have to do another 5 years to get citizenship. And then in most cases, dual citizenship isn't allowed, whereas in Portugal it is. So from a competitive standpoint, you know, it's hard to recommend to somebody to say, hey, go to Bulgaria as compared to Portugal. Say, well, I'd rather go to Portugal. The weather's better. You know, cost of living is, you know, not that much higher. Okay, taxes depends on how you earn income. Certain income is taxed better in Portugal. Some is worse under this this regime. But what you can do is you can move towards citizenship. So I do think that is a pretty interesting thing. If Bulgaria could come and say, okay, you know, we're going to get rid of the need for dual citizen, or we're going to allow dual citizenship, so you can keep yours while getting this. Number two, it is possible to get citizenship in probably 5 years is the reasonable time frame. That's, you know, what Ireland has. That's what Belgium has. You know, there's a bunch of countries that have 5 years, and then I think that, yeah, making it really easy to come in the first place, probably, you know, I mean, so Estonia led this movement back in the summer of 2020. They introduced the digital nomad visa, and they made it pretty easy. Like, you could do it online. Like right now, if I have two issues. One, if I want to come to Bulgaria, it's like a 3-month process, basically. I have to apply in my home country's embassy. It's going to take 30 days. This is like a bizarre thing. I've mentioned this to you before, Gabriel. You know, like, you have to apply in a foreign embassy, which sends your documents to Bulgaria, which then sends them back. And you can't just go to Bulgaria and apply. Like, it's very strange. And it's like, why does it take 30 days? I mean, in Dubai, it takes, you know, a few days. It's very, very quick. So there's some bureaucracy around that could be streamlined to make it much more attractive. And then the thing that goes along with it is, if I'm a factory owner and I'm going to bring my factory here, well, probably I have managers, I have skilled people who need to come and train them. I need an easy way to bring my managers in to come and work here and make that pretty straightforward. Or if I'm lacking skilled staff, I like Jim was mentioning with respect to the construction workers, I want to be in a position where I can go and bring those people in as well. Because what we were asking about, which is an interesting question, it's like, okay, so they're saying there's a shortage of skilled workers, and the narrative is, well, people don't want to be working in it because the wages are too low. But if there's actually a scarcity, then why is it that wages aren't going up just based on supply and demand? Something's wrong there. And I think it's not so much the question of, are there workers? It's just like, do they have the skill, the specialized areas of expertise? And so, yeah, I think that there's probably a lot that could be done in terms of immigration reform that would bring in a lot of, I think there's a ton of people who could come to Bulgaria.
Absolutely.
Well, first of all, about the wages, and because that was the last thing you were talking about, and about qualified workers. So the thing is, Bulgaria is producing a lot of qualified workers, actually. The universities are having a lot of students. Nearly everybody goes to university nowadays.
Mhm.
So we have qualified workers. The thing is, they're leaving the country.
I'm going to push back slightly on that. educated and qualified are two different things. Like there is a big gap between practical skills and hey, I've got a degree or something. So anyway, continue. But
that's true. The thing is, we have them, but they're leaving. And
yes.
after they graduate, they can't be qualified because they just go to Germany and be qualified there and earn like 5 times more money than they're going to earn here.
Yep.
So the money problem is the main thing, because Germany, as you said the UK, but they're not in the European Union anymore, so this doesn't count for them anymore. But they were going to the UK before, and you have all the Ireland and all the richer countries, Luxembourg, France. Spain, they go to Spain, all the people from Bulgaria. So they will go to Greece, some of them, to work during the summertime. So that's because they give a lot more money for the same job in those countries. And that's the main reason, because people want to raise their kids, they want to live a normal life, so they go to a country which is better developed than Bulgaria. And the European Union offers that, because we're not in the Schengen zone, but with the Bulgarian citizenship, you can go anywhere in the European Union and work there.
True.
So you don't need the Schengen zone if you're a normal worker. You just go anywhere you like and spend your life there. But we don't have many people coming to Bulgaria. We have a lot of people leaving Bulgaria because you don't have anything to do here. We have a lot of pensioners coming here, for example, from Germany and from England and so on, because they live a cheap life here with their pension from abroad. And so it's well to live in Bulgaria, for example, in a village, because some of them, they just buy a house in a village, and the houses in our villages are really cheap. Like you can buy a house in the village for 10 or 15,000 leva, which is like 8,000 euro, for example. And they just come here and they live their life here, and it's way cheaper for them. So, but we don't attract workers. We don't attract the working people and the population that's like driving the country forward. And that's the main problem. And I don't know how it can be fixed. The only way to fix it is by rising the wages, but it's really hard to rise the wages because the business doesn't have the money to do it, and they don't want to invest in Bulgaria in order to give higher wages because they don't have the people to work there. And it's like a cycle that goes on, because you're not going to invest in Bulgaria, because at the end, what happened, for example, 2 years ago, was that Volkswagen wanted to make a factory in Bulgaria for 5,000 people to work in it. And they were going to be on a really good wages, above 2,000 level, which for Bulgaria is pretty good, which is more than 1,000 euro. And they didn't do it in Bulgaria, they made it in Turkey, even though they have all the taxes to import goods from Turkey to the European Union, because they're not in the European Union. So they made it there because they have all the qualified workers. And I think what they said was they had 70,000 people working in the car manufacturing industry, so they can attract workers from that sphere of work, and they can't do that in Bulgaria because we don't have a car manufacturing industry in Bulgaria. So we have the engineers, but we don't have enough to fill the 5,000 people go, because everybody's working. And if you're not working for like an engineer in Bulgaria, you just went abroad or something. So at the end, we don't have enough qualified workers to work in those factories, which is the big problem.
Yeah, I think that's where, to me, focusing on people who are less dependent on that is really significant. Like if you can get these location independent workers, right? Because it's like, all right, if I'm an IT person, then I don't need to go to Germany to make the money because I make the money online, so it's irrelevant to me. In fact, I from Germany can move to Bulgaria. And so then the question is, okay, what do we have to do to attract people from Germany, from Denmark, from Sweden, from Norway, from Finland, from Ireland, from UK, etc., to come in? And part of that, I think, is, okay, easy immigration policy, but for EU citizens, that's not the case. Awareness, the marketing is probably a big thing. Certainly being in a situation where you kind of work on amping up the quality of lifestyle for people is a big deal. And I think in that regard, I would be looking seriously at, are there projects you can attract that will come in and, do developments? I don't know, what are the restrictions in terms of building permitting, et cetera, in Bulgaria to be able to, if somebody wanted to go do a major kind of like higher end development in Bulgaria? What's the process to get approved?
That's really hard. For example, just to build a normal apartment building, like a block of flats, you need at least 3 years to apply. And that's not because they can't do it. I mean, from one side is everything is on paper, as you said, so we don't have the digital government that we need. Because if you apply online, it will be much easier, but everything is on paper and everything has at least 1 month time for the government to respond. So after you file, I mean, you get the documents, you give them to the whatever institution you give them to, and after, for example, 29 days, they come with an answer, and the answer is like, oh, you forgot to give us that document. So you go there, you give them the document, and another 1 month starts. And like that, they're wasting your time for like a few months at least. But normally they do that not because it can't be do faster. Of course, it can be done faster. The thing is, they want to get money out of you. So at the end, you have to go there and they're going to be like, well, for that to go faster, you need to give us, for example, 5,000 leva. And you're going to have the documents in 2 days or tomorrow.
Right.
So that's one of the problems. Again, the corruption. So if you're a normal person with a little bit of connections, you're going to need around 3 years to build something. If you don't have any connections, it may take a while, or maybe you're never going to reach that point. I mean, it's not funny, but that's how it is.
No, I mean, yeah.
Yeah, no, I think again, it kind of comes down to some of the same things that we're discussing here in terms of like, okay, what are the practical steps to do something like digitizing the government and making things more efficient and streamlining?
That's one of our main goals now, to digitalize everything. For the first, I think, 1 year of this government, we're going to remove 15% of the administration in the government, which is part of the digitalizing thing. And as we removed 15% of the administration in Bulgaria, we're going to have a lot more workers available at the market, which should come to a more, how to say it? I mean, this should be a good thing for the business from one side. So I think that's a good start. And if they keep removing the administration and making everything digital and computerized and easier for everybody, this will be a huge benefit for the country. And you're going to have a lot skilled workers working in the country as well, which were before that in the administration, because you have a lot of people that are experts in different spheres, and by removing some of them as well, you can bring them to the business. That's one of the good things to do.
Yeah.
Also, there is one other thing that we will maybe propose.
I'm
thinking about it right now, to proposing it to our party now as we're in the government. I don't know what you think about it. It's to have, for example, if you file documents in the country, in whatever institution it is, and you need their permit, you need it signed by the government so you can build a building, let's say. So after you file them, now it's 1 month, and then after 1 month, they have to give you an answer. In some cases, it's forever. I mean, there isn't any period that you have to wait. You just have to wait as long as you have to wait. Like, nobody tells you when is it going to be done. We had that one problem with one of our documents, because my father is filing such documents for one building now. And for example, in the Ministry of Culture, they are staying there for 8 months and they're just not responding. Like, they just don't do anything about it. So what I'm thinking now is to make it, for example, 2 weeks or 3 weeks or something like that, which is a must. And in 2 or 3 weeks, if the government, if the institution doesn't respond with a yes or no answer, it's a yes. Because they're delaying it on purpose. They're doing it on purpose now, and you're waiting, for example, for 3 months. You go to the institution, you're like, what the hell is going on? I'm waiting for 3 months. And they're like, well, you can wait 3 more, but you can give us 5,000 and everything is going to be fine, and you're going to have it done tomorrow. So by giving them that period of, let's say, 2 weeks, you remove part of the corruption as well. Because they can say no if everything is fine with the documents. They have to say yes. And if they just don't answer, it's just a yes. And you just start building your block of flats, let's say.
Yeah. I think that's a very interesting idea. That's super interesting concept. I like it. One of the things that I wanted to dig into a little bit was you mentioned at the beginning about how electricity prices have risen a lot. And you were talking about the idea of giving subsidies. Now, to me, when electricity prices rise up, the idea is not that you should be giving subsidies. The question is, what's the failure of the free market that's resulted in prices being high? Like, why don't we have more supply entering the market to drive those costs down?
That's kind of a funny story now because we're in the perfect storm. And that's not because of the government, not because of the companies. It just happened. And it can be explained in a really funny way, kind of, because what's going on now, it's a problem for the whole European Union. Everywhere in Europe, now you have a higher electricity price than you had last year, for example, or a few months ago. And that's because of a few reasons. First of all the Nordic countries there, Denmark, Sweden, and so on, they don't have, there isn't enough wind there. So they don't produce enough energy from the wind turbines, which makes them work more on gas and make that's a problem for the whole Europe. Now, because there isn't enough wind there, they work on gas. The second problem is, okay, they're working on gas, that's not a big deal. The thing is that the gas is coming from Russia. And that's where all the gas is coming to Europe.
Right.
The thing is, Russia has a certain amount of gas that they're producing, natural gas, and selling it to all around the world, especially Europe and China. The thing is, because of the coronavirus crisis, last year, when they had to deal about the natural gas for this year, the European Union decided that they don't need as much natural gas as they needed before because their economy slowed down. So the deal they made was for less gas. And what Russia did, because they're producing the gas, they can't stop the production lines. So they had to sell it to someone. And they offered it to China. So they sold all their gas to China for this year. So Europe, at the end, doesn't have enough gas because of Russia selling it to China. So it's funny because, it wasn't like a thing that anybody expected. And the European Union recovered from the corona crisis faster than expected. And because of the vaccines, because of everything. So now the economy is working more than it was expected to work, and it doesn't have the energy. So the only way to do it is to ask Russia to do something about it and give us more gas. And Russia is like, well, the new gas and the more gas you're asking is going to cost a lot more money because we don't have another choice. So we have to pay the money. And that's why in Europe, everybody is having huge electricity bills because we're working mainly on gas now everywhere in Europe. And this gas is coming at a much more expensive price. And also there is another problem in China because their rainy season wasn't rainy enough. So their water dams, which produce electricity, aren't producing enough electricity. So they're relying on natural gas as well. So they're pushing Russia to give them more as well. And Russia is just raising the prices because they can't do anything else. And that's how the market works. Like, if you need gas, you're going to pay for it. That's how it works. They're not bad. They're just doing their job and earning their money. So I'm not accusing them. I'm just like, okay, we can't do anything about it. And we have to pay those prices and have everything running. And now that's why in Bulgaria, we have a 3 times increase in the power, in the electricity.
Yeah.
And also a way to fix it is be more independent at your production of electricity. And one way to do it is through nuclear powered energy. And I'm a big fan of the nuclear powered energy. Another big fan in the European Union is France. They're producing like 80% of their energy through nuclear fusion, and that's why they have the lowest increase in the rates of the electricity. And the price. And Bulgaria,
Ironically, I don't know, like, Germany didn't take math lessons or something because they went and shut down all their nuclear power over the last while, somehow thinking they were fighting climate change or something, not realizing that actually gas is worse for the environment than
course,
nuclear
and
is. And they've
nuclear
made
power
it.
is not harming the environment.
No, it's great. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I'm curious because so there's this interesting question of an opportunity for Bulgaria. So Bill Gates has a company called Terrapower. It's a kind of fourth gen nuclear reactor system. It's designed to be extremely safe, and it actually burns uh, basically depleted uranium. So you're in a situation where you can use the waste products that are normally from previous reactors in order to burn them. And so they reached a certain stage, and they were going to build in China the first reactors. But then Trump came along and shut all of that down so that the American companies couldn't go and do it in China, and they have to do it somewhere else. I wonder if Bulgaria could go to them and say, hey, we'll give you the permitting, etc., to come and build the Terrapower reactors in Bulgaria and do it here. I'd be curious about that.
That's possible, but not really from another side. And there is a problem with that. First of all, Bulgaria has one nuclear power plant.
Yep.
It had 6 reactors on it. 4 of them are not working because they had to be closed because they're too old, and the European Union wanted us to close them. They made us close them actually in order to enter the European Union. That was one of the things we had to do. So we are running on 2 reactors, which are the newest ones, and they're built in the 70s. So they're not that new at all.
Yes.
But in the same time, these 2 reactors are producing 25% of the energy need of Bulgaria.
Yeah.
And nuclear power is the cheapest one, which means we're producing cheap energy compared to the gas and everything else. The other ways we produce energy is through coal mines, and we have coal mines in Bulgaria, which is the dirtiest way to do it, and it's way more expensive than the nuclear one. And also the natural gas, which is not that, it's not hurting the environment that much, but in the same time, it's still expensive. So the best way to do it is through nuclear power. We have another nuclear power plant that's being built in Belene, because this one that's working now, it's in Kuzludui. The other one, it's in Belene. So the Belene...
we have no idea where those are.
They're on the Dunav River.
The Dunav River. Okay.
Yeah, they're up there on the river.
Michael, the Dunav River, bro.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I keep telling you.
We don't. I don't know. I guess we are geographically a little ignorant when it comes to. Is it close here to the region in Sofia?
It's the border of Bulgaria and Romania.
Yeah.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, Rus or whatever you pronounce it.
It's a huge river that comes from Germany and ends in the Black Sea. It's the biggest one in Europe, I think, or maybe something like that. So it's a huge river running through Europe, let's say. What I was saying is that there we have a new nuclear power plant that we're building. And you said about Bill Gates. The thing is, we don't need Bill Gates now because we have 2 reactors that are there waiting to be assembled. I mean, we bought them, the country bought them, they're staying there. And for the last, I think, around 5 or 6 or maybe even 10 years, they're just staying there and nobody's assembling them, which is like crazy. So they're just chilling at the river. And nobody's assembling those 2 reactors. And that's because of geopolitics as well. It's because they're Russian. So we bought them from Russia. And the US doesn't like that because they want us to buy them from the US. So there is like some interference from outside to Bulgaria that we are not doing much about those reactors from one side. And the other problem is that in order to assemble them, we need around 5 billion more. We paid around 5 billion in order for them to be in Bulgaria, but we need another 5 billion to assemble them and make everything working. So we don't have those money, and that's another problem.
So I don't follow your line of argument here. So you're like, hey, we don't need Bill Gates because we've got this. Now, whether you need Bill Gates or not, I think it's a business opportunity to invite them to say, hey, look, we'll give you a place where you can come and build this reactor because you can't do it in China. So I feel
But
like
then-
there's an opportunity there.
But if you do that, you throw away 5 billion that you already invested. You just throw them in the trash.
I mean, first of all, so we'll get to that in a second. But that being said, I don't think that that's necessarily the case. I mean, you're talking about industry leading technology. You're talking about the ability to basically be the ones who distribute that. And look, clearly, it's not just this, Bulgaria that needs the power. The rest of Europe just had 3x their power bill, or very high increases in their power bill. So you can export that power to all over the place. So I don't know that there is going to be, over time, we're going to need more power, not less power. So that's one side of it.
Mhm.
The second is, you're telling me, hey, we don't need it because we've got these reactors. But for 10 years, we've done nothing. And we can't do anything because we need another 5 billion. So it seems to me like you kind of do need Bill Gates to say, hey, Bill, come in and put the 5 billion into building your reactor here, because we're obviously not able to do it ourselves. Then we'll get some power. We'll be an industry leader. We'll go and we'll export that. And then if we turn out we can do the other stuff with the Russian reactors, maybe we will. But in the meantime, at least we've got some power. I mean, am I missing something here?
Yeah, I mean, you have that point here. But the other thing is that the working power plants, the nuclear power plant, it's state-owned. It's one of the last big things that are state-owned. And this one in Belene,
Can you sell it to us for $100,000? Jim and I will write the check right now.
I mean, look, if you need 5 bill, we can start with this 100 grand.
The other thing is the new one in Belene that is staying there and not being assembled. It's state-owned as well. And that's one of the reasons we're not inviting Bill Gates, is that we prefer state-owned energy, because this gives you independence. Because otherwise, when you give it to a company or anyone, you're giving like a strategic thing to somebody else to control. And that's like the mindset in Bulgaria. And I think it's kind of fine, because it really gives you independence no matter what happens.
Well, it leaves you with 3 times more power and no power plant. But hey, what can we say?
You get what?
You get your power bills go up by a factor of 3x, and you don't get the power plant anyway. So I don't know.
I mean, yeah, we need it. And that's a good thing. I mean, we can actually talk with Bill Gates, I guess. The thing is, we need that one built as well. And that's a huge investment that the country has to do, but it's something that we need, because Bulgaria is still selling energy to all around, the countries around Bulgaria, to Greece, to Turkey, to Serbia, Macedonia, and Romania. Like, we're selling to everybody. Because we have that huge nuclear power plant that the others don't have. Mm-hmm. Because none of the countries around us have any nuclear power plants except Turkey. And Turkey are building 7 more. So they're actually investing there.
The other thing is, maybe Bill would be willing to give you part ownership of the power plant if you gave him a place to build the power plant. It's like, he's busy having a hard time building the power plant. But Bulgaria can't build a power plant, I don't know. It seems like an example of an opportunity that a deal could be done if the prime minister went and made it happen or something.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good suggestion. We can try suggesting that, actually. I mean, really, we will try suggesting that to see what the politicians think in Bulgaria about it. But it's a good thing that can be done for sure, because especially now we have power problems and we need investments in order to fix them. Also, those coal power plants that we have, in the next 6 years, we have to close them because there is no more coal there. So we are going to need more energy, and it has to come from somewhere. So it's a good investment for sure. Mm-hmm. Also, the European Union is having this Green Deal, and the Green Deal is going to have a lot of solar panels and all kinds of things that are going to be like funds for Bulgaria, so we can build them. Which means that there will be a lot of European projects coming out now for building solar plants and wind turbines and all kinds of things for green energy, for making the energy in the whole European Union green. And one of this, the other thing is that this is going to compensate the coal power plants, and we're going to compensate them by sun and wind. Which is nice, but we can't rely on that because, as I said earlier, You saw what happened in the Nordic states, the Nordic countries there. There wasn't enough wind, so they had to rely on gas. So we have to have a nuclear power plant for sure, which can be like a thing that is more sustainable for the country, and we can rely on that.
Mm-hmm.
And it produces even cheaper electricity than everything else,
mm-hmm.
which is a good thing because we are a poor country, so we need the cheaper energy.
Yeah. And in hindsight, you shouldn't make it public that you'll work with Bill, given that I feel that half of Bulgarians hate Bill for all sorts of conspiracies. Therefore, if you say that Bill did it, then people will be kind of keen to kick you out of the government.
Yeah, because they think that there are microchips in the vaccines.
Who knows what? Anyways, so let's see here. So anything else, Michael? Something else that we should add here before we wrap this up? Or Gabriel, if you have any other suggestions or topics of interest that we can go over.
I think the last question that I would love to kind of hear what you have to say, Gabriel, is just about the relationship between Bulgaria and the EU, the pros, the cons of that, and like how that influences the ability to make positive changes, how that can be used as a positive thing or whether there's, issues, etc. Can you kind of fill us in on how that works and your impression of it?
Well, I'm a big fan of the European Union, actually. And I think Bulgaria should get in closer connections with the European Union, because there, at the moment, with that economy that we have as a country, we can't be independent. We rely on the European Union in terms of markets, in terms of funds as well. Because, for example, we can't move to green energy if we don't have the European Union, as we talked a bit earlier now. Mm-hmm. We can't have roads without the European Union, like normal highways, because they're all funded by the European Union and they're part of the European projects for having connections with Turkey. And Bulgaria is on a really nice crossroad between Turkey and the European Union. That's why we get a lot of funds as well. In terms of roads, because as you know, Istanbul is one of the biggest cities in the world, actually. So when you have that big city with that huge country, Turkey, with 80 million people living there, you need good connections with that country and good roads as well for all the trucks to travel. That's the good part of being in the European Union. We also get all of funds in all different subjects, in all different kinds of spheres. For example, in Sofia, the metro is being built by the European Union and by a European Union project. So in the metro of Bulgaria, the subway, around I think 400 or 500 million euro go every single year for expanding it and building it better. Mm-hmm. Also, the whole public transport, if you see all the buses, the new ones, especially the trams and everything, they all have signs of the European Union having all those projects. For example, now during the Corona crisis, we had funds from the European Union for the small business because I have a cafe. And it's like a shisha bar cafe. We also had funds from the European Union for being closed, and the funds were like 10% of the 10%. I don't know. I don't remember.
Of the annualized revenue or what?
I think of the revenue. Yes, 10% of the revenue of the company, but up to 10,000.
Got it.
Like you have a huge revenue, you can get millions. It was up to 10,000, and for the big business, actually, it was up to 150,000. Mm-hmm. So they were actually giving you 150,000 euro if you're a big company in Bulgaria that's struggling, and if you have more than 20 or 30% decrease in the revenue for the year. And this is mainly all the cafes, restaurants, and hotels and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And this was a huge help from Europe. And we need to ask the European Union for more projects in that way in order to save our economy, which is weak, and the coronavirus is even ruining it even more now. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Fair enough.
So yeah, I'm a fan of the European Union.
Fair enough.
Right. Are there cases where maybe there's challenges that Bulgaria can't overcome themselves? Like, what is the mechanism by which you can go to the EU and request, say, hey, listen, can you guys help us with this? How does that process work?
There are budgets. We have the European Parliament members from Bulgaria that are elected there. They're there to basically represent Bulgaria in the European Union and the European Parliament. So there you have all the discussions about budgets, about funds for every country, and everything is about discussion and about accepting at the end, accepting the European budget, which has Bulgaria has its own part there. And we also give 1%, I think, of our GDP to the European Union, if I'm not mistaken. So 1% goes to the European Union as I don't know, like a tax that we have to pay in order to be part of the union, but we actually get more than we give. So it's better for Bulgaria to stay in the union because, for example, countries like Germany, they give more than they get. And the whole point of this is the richer countries to fund the poorer countries in order to have a strong, independent European Union.
Yeah. Cool.
Fair enough. Last thing, and I think that's a little bit more of a funny subject compared to the serious things that we talked about. But I would like your observations. Michael and I discussed that on our last episode, specifically for Bulgaria. And that is how there is, lack of service of some sort. I thought that it is lack of resourcefulness that folks have, probably because they're not paid enough and so on. Michael thought that it's more of lack of motivation. Was it, Michael?
Yeah, basically.
And also lack of the market speaking English as much, and being able to service better, basically the international folks that come here and don't yet speak the language. So what do you think that is? I know that a lot of people, and that happens in Greece as well, but here in Bulgaria, a lot of people will say, hey, listen, you should learn the language instead of basically getting the people to learn the global language. And we were talking about how just one example, one sector is in India. Web development is something that you can do significantly. Let's say you can get paid significantly more if you just speak English because you have access to international clients, versus if you don't speak English, you typically work for somebody that does, and they just outsource the work to you, and they just keep the difference, right? The discrepancy. So there's the manager that speaks English that just hires all the people that don't. They pay them, whatever, for example, $500, but they outsource their work for $1,500 a month, and they keep the differential. So why do you think there's this pushback? Obviously, the young generation, I see that, they speak some basic English or good English like yourself, but in general, the market and all the people that occupy the market, for the most part, don't. Why do you think there's a pushback? And, what do you think is going on here?
Well, actually, I don't think Bulgaria has such a big problem with the English. A lot of Bulgarians, especially the new generations, speak English. Maybe not perfect, I don't speak a perfect English, but I can manage to talk.
Oh yeah, you're pretty good, man.
Everything. So the thing is, a lot of Bulgarians, especially as I said, the new generation, speak English because English is a mandatory language in school nowadays. So in school, you basically learn English. And we have a lot of English schools. Of course, we have other schools like German, French, and so on. But the main language that we learn outside of the Bulgarian one is English. Of course, there are depends where you live in the country, like the smaller cities and the smaller villages. They don't know that much English, and I don't know if they need it. Maybe they need it in order to become a better person in life and earn more money, but they don't need it if they stay in that village. So if they want to develop and become a better person, better in terms of living a good life with a lot of money in Bulgaria or outside of Bulgaria and earn a lot of money, they will need English or another language. So Bulgaria doesn't really have that problem, especially in the big cities, because nowadays nearly everyone will understand you, at least the basics of English. If you go to a restaurant or somewhere, all the waiters know English nowadays. The bars, the waiters know English.
Do they? I don't know.
Well, at least that's what I've seen. I don't know. You for sure
It's easier to believe that they speak English when you're not an English native speaker. I think is a little bit of the impression.
I mean, they will understand you. For sure, they don't have the best English ever, but they will understand what you're saying. Like on the basic level, it's fine. The problem is with the higher education in English. Like they can't work with English language, for example, in a foreign country or work in a foreign company because they don't have that much of a good English.
I think where I've noticed it most shocking in Bulgaria, the lack of English, is in banks. Like it is shocking to me that if you walk into most banks in Bulgaria, you will find there is maybe one person in the bank who speaks English. And I would have thought this would be a place where it would be common. Like it's true to your point, waiters, generally speaking, I find it's not a problem. If I go into the malls and I go to like a cell phone booth, or if I go to Technopolis or something like that, generally people are decent there. But in banks, it really, really not good. And I'm just like,
that's interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's really, really prohibitive in that regard, and speaks again to the challenges of attracting a foreign entrepreneur to coming to Bulgaria to get set up, right? Like, I feel as though the most basic intention should be, okay, let's try and attract people who are producing, people who are making money, people, stuff like this. It's like, okay, what do you have to do? Well, you have to make immigration policy easy for them. You want to try and remove bureaucracy, etc. Like the system of notarization in Bulgaria is kind of pointless. Then forming companies, you want to do that easily, and you want to do banking easily. And forming companies is not great. Registering for VAT is terrible. Like, I don't know why you can't just go onto the website and be like, hey, here's my company number, register for VAT, get a VAT number. It should take 5 minutes, It's like, no, you have to actually pay somebody like 500 euros to go and do this for you because it's sufficiently complex, which seems bizarre. And then, the banking thing. And nowadays you walk into banks and they're like, we're not really sure if we want your business.
Yeah.
Give us a month to decide, then we'll let you know whether we bought it. It's like, what? And that's if you can get somebody who speaks English. So making that whole process just much easier. Fortunately, you have these fintechs in the EU. They've done a pretty good job of that to make it a little bit easier in that regard. But it's the banks are an area where I find English is lacking.
What I'm thinking now is that maybe the reason that people in banks don't speak English is that in the banks you earn less than you earn as a waiter.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why they don't work as waiters. Like really.
No, it just, but the general standard I find, like, okay, hotels, in most times hotels will have staff that like speak English, but a lot of times we're gonna have trouble finding solutions as fast as like in other places. Now another one would be like telephone internet companies. For me personally, is a whole problem finding somebody that can help me speaking the language. Like for example, A1, there hasn't been a single time where I call that company and the first line of support don't speak English at all. We're talking about maybe 50 out of 50 phone calls. Every single one, they say, my colleagues will call you, and they hang up on you. And then the second tier of support has to call you that specifically speaks English. That is after you've selected on the menu that it's English, and so there's many examples like that in general. Now, of course, like lots of folks that ask me whether or not I have a difficulty living here as somebody that doesn't fluently speak the language. I tell them, hey, listen, I'm getting by just fine, but I just know that I've probably heard this more than any other place, more than Greece for sure. And it wouldn't be me that hears, hey, listen, learn Greek, but I've had this discussion with quite a lot of people, and I've had foreigners come to Greece and haven't had similar experiences to where they say, learn Bulgarian or leave, right? And the mindset should be kind of reversed. It's like, no, learn the global language so you can work in that environment. Now, again, to your point, if you live in a village and you decide you want to live there, is it necessary? Maybe not, right? But if you live in a capital, then you probably should, right? And just because there's not just people that come and live there and plan on living there forever, but there's people that come there as tourists. Like, how are you going to attract tourism if you don't have a sufficient population that occupies the market specifically, right? Like, you don't want the random grandma that walks on the road to speak English, but specifically the people that occupy the services market, right? So these are the people that matter at the end of the day. So there are tourists, there are people that are coming here on temporary residency, right? And the argument a lot of times is, well, those folks should learn Bulgarian. And it's like, well, should they? I would not advise people that come to Greece temporarily to go learn Greek, just because there's no utility in Greek in somebody's life unless they plan on living in Greece, right? Like, it's not spoken so often outside of Greece. So same goes for Bulgarian. But the argument for English, because I made a video on my channel where I was talking about the pros and cons, and a lady came at me and she was saying how, basically learning English is like colonizing Bulgarian. It's like, what? It's like, that's just, an interesting way of looking at things, right? Like, you're not trying to colonize, you're trying to give people a better opportunity to enter in the market and, make more, as well as obviously be able to attract people that, come here that don't speak the language. So, but interesting that you haven't really noticed it. I mean, I guess you probably haven't as a native, but I know that you have some friends that are international. So I was wondering if that's something that you had noticed to some degree. But yeah, pay can be definitely one of the factors, one of the variables.
I haven't actually noticed that because I never needed to use English in Bulgarian.
Yeah. Okay.
Perfect.
I think that's it for me. I don't really have something else to add. Gabriel, is there something else, like another, I don't know, problem or something in Bulgaria that you think is worth discussing besides the ones that we brought up?
I don't know right now.
I think we're pretty safe to wrap it up. So I'd like to take the opportunity and thank you very, very much for coming on.
Absolutely. Yeah, really appreciate you coming on and chatting with us.
Thank you very much for inviting me. It was a great pleasure for me to join you guys and have this nice talk about the problems in Bulgaria. And we actually solved some of them, and we actually going to propose those things to our government, some of them. So we're going to have these discussions more often with you if you want.
Perfect.
Maybe in the podcast, maybe in private as well. And whatever questions you have or things that have to be changed and you have as suggestions, you can always contact me and tell me. And I will do my best to move those things to the government and tell them that these are actually problems in our country that we have to fix. Because from the other side, we don't see all those problems. Because we are native Bulgarians, we stay here and we don't see our problems from inside because we're used to them and they're part of our normal life. So you need somebody from outside to come and tell you, hey, the world is different. You have to change in order to compete with the world, or otherwise you're going to stay there and be basic country somewhere in Europe.
Absolutely. Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to remember the name, because this gentleman here, he will become a great politician. I want you to vote for him. Given that he doesn't want to raise taxes, if he does, don't vote for him. But do follow the advice, do your own due diligence. He's a great guy, so look out for him as he's coming up. I'd like to thank all our viewers for sticking around and watching the episode. Thank you very much. If you haven't already liked the video, make sure to do so, and definitely subscribe to the channel, as there's a lot more coming up. Michael, something else here on the ending remarks, sir.
I just wanted to, echo what you said. Thanks very much. Really appreciate you coming here. It's very much appreciated to have kind of the inside scoop on what's going on behind the scenes. And yeah, we'll look forward to having some more conversations.
All righty. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
guys.
All right, guys. See you on the next episode.